I taught a painting class. I have run classes before. I used to be a water safety instructor when I was a teenager, and I've done a lot of job training stuff as part of my career path. I think I nailed the prep work for an event like this. And you know what? Overall, it was a really positive experience. I had a very good crowd of people. There was a total of 16 people that showed up. There were a couple speed bumps, there were a couple hiccups, but you know what? I'm going to talk about that a little bit later. Let me run down what I did to prepare and what my class was all about. The idea for this class was to go over the very basics of miniature painting, to go over the 3 different techniques that I think every new painter needs to learn when they first start out painting. Base coating with a slightly diluted base coat, dry brushing, and washes. So basically, I had it set up so everyone was assigned 2 pre-primed miniatures. And I would talk about priming miniatures at the start of the class. They would have a very simple miniature, in most cases, a box or a barrel, and they would have a miniature of their choice. And this way, I could go through the steps of what to do for each step on the crate or barrel, and then they could experiment a little bit more with the miniature that they picked out. And this way, too, they would have something to do while the base coat was drying on the crate or barrel. They could move on to base coating the other miniature. Now, of course, this meant that I had to give up quite a few of my inexpensive miniatures for this class, but you know what? I have way too many miniatures, so I was more than happy to provide them. Everyone got 3 brushes, a big brush for base coating, a smaller brush for any detail work, and then sort of a natural hair brush for dry brushing. Boy, it's actually hard to find cheap camel hair brushes. These actually used to be like super inexpensive, but now I guess the places that used to manufacture them just aren't. You used to be able to go in the craft store and just get camel hair brushes, and now when you look, most of them are artificial camel hair, which is not the same thing. So, but you know, you can just go there, and in the craft section, you can still find the floppy brushes, and even the artificial style brushes. They do a good job of doing dry brushing, which is really what you need a more like moppy style brush for, is the dry brushing. And I just used cheap miniature brushes from Amazon for this class, which have the drawback of immediately after you start using them, they're going to start breaking down because they're cheaply made. Obviously, if anyone was to have a real interest in miniature painting, I would see what sort of brushes your local hobby shop or local game shop has. I know that Army Painter Regiment, still the brush of my choice as the workhorse brush. I know that Citadel makes some very good basic brushes, but again, just from my experience, the Regiment brush from Army Painter is a good thing. But again, if you buy like a clearance paint set, you'll get a basic brush maybe with some of those paint sets, and those are also a good starting point as well for a base coating and or a little detail brush. But yeah, I would hold off on buying the fancy brushes from the painting section of a craft store. They do sell those. They will sell the sable hair brushes there and stuff, but they're going to be very expensive, and you will probably get a lot more use out of a nice $10 or less specific miniature painting brush from your local game store. That's what I would suggest going with. And then eventually, once you've kind of figured out what you like and what you don't like, then you can, move on from there. And if you want to go with the fancier brushes. And I talked about basic brush care as well, making sure that you don't put paint past the halfway point of the bristle, and that you don't leave your brushes in water, and that once you rinse off your brush, you always want to let your brush dry after rinsing it or cleaning it. You always want to have it dry on the side, because having it dry upright is a bad idea, because that's going to wear down the glue holding in the bristles. So yeah, I just went over the basic stuff like that when it came to paintbrushes right at the start of class. Everyone got a palette, a rinse cup, a paper towel, an assortment of acrylic paint. I talked about briefly that you don't have to use miniature paint. You can use craft paint, but it does need to be watered down a little bit to get a proper consistency. Most of the paints were clearance paint from the miniature market. Love those deals. I explained, the basics of acrylic paint, and I quickly moved on to the base coat. I talked briefly about priming at this step. As you all know, some PVC miniatures, the companies that make them claim that they can have good paint adhesion with just an undiluted base coat for the first coat. I find it simply easier to use polyurethane primer as a primer for pretty much any miniature except for ones that are plastic, resin, and metal, in which case a spray primer is generally going to have the best effect. But a polyurethane primer like Vallejo, and if you're going to be getting that, I would suggest you get the Vallejo Mecha Primer. It's going to have a really good adhesion. That first coat is going to coat the miniature and give it really good. The paint's going to be able to stick to it, so you're not going to have issues of paint chipping off. And of course, you have to wash the miniature first before you put the primer on there, because the vast majority of miniatures, they're going to have some sort of release agent still on the miniature. Even if they say you don't need to wash it, just wash it. It's always better to be sure, and it takes like a couple seconds washing it with just regular dish soap. Rinse it off thoroughly, and then you can paint on or do a airbrush, I guess, with the polyurethane primer. And you're ready for your base coat then. All the miniatures that I provided for this were ready to go, and bing, bang, boom. I taught them that they could use a little bit of water, but I used watered down flow improver, acrylic flow improver, which you can buy at any craft store. I said that 2 drops of paint, 1 drop of flow improver to get that lovely kind of diluted bit of first coat for the miniature. My plan is to allow them to see how it would be darker in the crevices and deep points and lighter on the outside, and that will give you a good working place to start out with painting the miniature for the next steps. Next step, of course, once that's dry, is dry brushing. Load a brush up with a lighter tone of paint, or with some miniatures, just white. Load up a brush with this paint about halfway up the bristle, and then paint a paper towel a few times until it seems like there's not much paint left. And then with a very light brush, you can sort of brush against the texture of the miniature. And if you're doing it correct, you'll see that only the top surfaces are going to take that paint. Now, a lot of people are saying that, if you're doing it this very basic technique, you're going to get kind of a chalky look to it, which is fine because I'm doing washes as the final step. So, what we had is a barrel or a crate, which we gave a somewhat diluted first base coat. We let that dry. We did a dry brushing of either lighter, the color that they chose to paint the barrel, a little bit of lighter color on that. And then after that, we did the washes, which I just did the super simple version of this, where I just had them do a brown or a tan wash, or then I kind of taught people how they can make their own wash from different colors. But on the simple models, my idea was just to do a brown or tan wash, and then just have your brush loaded up, and then gently apply it and let it sink into the recesses of your miniature. Then you can clean and wipe off your brush and then tap away excess wash to lighten the effect if needed. But because we were doing simple miniatures like barrels and crates, it would actually be fine if they left a heavy bit of wash on the miniature to dry. And then the second part of the class went really well because I kind of taught the people these different steps when they were painting their more complex miniature, and I let them sort of get more into painting the miniature and doing these different steps and figuring out different stuff. And it all went really well. People did some incredible stuff in this class for people that I know this is like the first miniature they've ever painted. So it made me feel really great to help out people like that. But yeah, no, I kind of explained to them, hey, if you got a miniature where you want the facial expressions to stand out a bit, you can do like a nice tan wash or a flesh wash, and you can sort of apply just a little bit, and that will help the facial features pop a little bit on the animal miniature that they were painting. Or, you know, they can do just different dry brushes until they get the effect that they want with doing lighter colors and then a very light dry brush of white. So yeah, it worked out. So there were some issues, like I said. We had some people that immediately started loading up their palettes with paint before the class even started. And you know me, I'm pretty much I'm pretty frugal when it comes to stuff like this. I know for a fact that you really only need like 8 drops of paint to fully paint a miniature. And for people to waste that much paint, it's just like, boy, I know it's old paint. This is stuff I got on clearance. It was already old when I bought it, so I shouldn't feel so bad. But at the same time, I think I'm going to have it a little bit more structured. The other issue that I ran up to is that the first step, people started doing 2 different colors for the simple barrel miniature. And I should have just really focused down and said, you got to follow my instructions exactly for the first miniature, just to like, so they understand the basics. Because if you start doing different colors for the barrel, then like it's going to just screw everything up, and it's very confusing. And because people were doing different colors and stuff, it took longer for the paint to dry. And so then they were trying to do the dry brush step while their paint was still wet on the miniature, and that didn't really work out all that well. And yeah. And of course, you know, some people just weren't there to really learn, which was super weird. But yeah, that's kind of just a one-person thing, so you don't really want to focus on that too much. But I understand now why all the classes that I took were really structured. And I still really want to focus down and try to have a class where people can kind of experiment a little bit on their more complex miniature. But I really need to focus down and tell people a couple things. Number 1, don't touch the paint brushes or paint until I've done my 5 minutes. That seems weird, but people were like using the dry brush for the base coat step, and I guess I wasn't clear enough about that. So then when they got to the point where they were going to do the dry brush, they didn't have a brush that was like super dry, so it just made it a little bit more complex. Again, people were using like I cried when I was cleaning out the palettes, because people were literally like just blowing through like $10 worth of paint for no reason. It's just, it's very frustrating. So, and I just really want to just let people know, just don't use any washes or metallic paints until I've gotten through the first 3 steps. Because I think with amateurs, metallic paints just don't really work unless you use them as a dry brush step. And washes can work wonders as a base coat, frankly. I've done several miniatures where it's basically just a series of washes. But I think that it's best just to avoid those until I've gone over the 3 steps. And that's my biggest thing. I learned a lot. I don't want to make it seem like people didn't have a good time and there weren't, 16 people took this class without really any issues, and a little bit of wasted paint is not too high a price to pay for experience when it comes to teaching this class. I think I'm going to be as good as this went, and I did get a lot of positive feedback from the community and from people who were posting the miniatures that they painted online, which made me feel really happy. But I think the next class that I'm going to teach is going to be even better, and I might actually try to fully knuckle down and translate this into an online class that I will upload here. But yeah, let me know. Hey, if you know if there's natural hair brushes out there that are still available and maybe under a different name, let me know. As far as I know, if you want a little bit of a step up, the Porknoy brushes from Porkanoy, I don't know how to pronounce it. It's the Dwarven Forge brushes, basically. They have very nice natural hair brushes. I love these things. These are built tough, and they're very good for dry brushing. Excellent stuff. And then the different brands that you can get at Michael's, generally the slightly more expensive brands. What I would avoid is any kind of nameless brand that you just find at the dollar store or the $5 store. Those brushes, unfortunately, are very low quality, and they're not going to stand up. There are still brushes occasionally you can find good deals on, like the Royal Fine Sable brushes and different craft brushes that do have either high quality artificial or a little bit of stuff. Again, I was actually super impressed. I did the super cheap. I basically just word searched camel hair brushes, and I looked for the cheapest ones available, and I found some for like $3 for a 3-pack. And I was a little bit... They seemed a little bit cheap at first, but actually after the first use, man, you can just tell the difference between a natural hair brush and an artificial brush. And, you know, it might just be worth the extra bit of money. And I did find that one of my favorite dry brushes that I just encountered during the class, I just started using this brush that I found at the Goodwill by the pound. And dang, this is one of the best dry brushes I've ever used. And it was just a random brush that I found at the Goodwill by the pound. So yeah, I definitely might actually buy a full set of these specialized brushes. They're very cool. And I really liked the way it worked. You could just really get in there and just dry brush the heck out of stuff. I'll include a picture of the crate set from the Altar Quest game that I painted during the class, just as an example. But yeah, that was the basic set. I'm going to be doing another class called More Basics. And basically it's the same class, but I'm going to go over and I'm going to be a little bit more structured. Again, everybody wants to be loosey-goosey. Everybody wants to be like, just, hey man, just do your own thing. But I think structure with something like this really helps out people. And I could not believe that someone said that these were the first miniatures that they ever painted. I would have to say these people probably have used brushes for some other art project other than miniatures before. But yeah, either that or I'm just like the best painter I'm the best painter instructor that has ever existed, in which case, I mean, I need to share my genius online with you. But yeah. So that was my story about teaching a painting class, teaching my very first painting class. It's going to be the first of many. And yeah, let me know in the comments below if you're interested in taking a painting class online and whether or not I should just do another complete basics video with full video explaining what's going on and just doing each step and showcasing it. I might just do that anyways, but if there's anything specific you want me to teach, here's the thing. I am an expert at the basic techniques. I will never claim to be an award-winning painter. I'm just not. But dang, I'm really good at basic stuff, and I'm really good at speed painting. And yeah, so yeah, I'll probably go over my techniques with that. But if there's anything specific you want me to touch on, then let me know in the comments below. And I'll also try to link some of the really cool brushes that I really found that were helpful. But yeah, but again, your best bet with all that stuff is just go to your local craft store and see if they have Vallejo in stock or Army Painter in stock. Those are good brands. Reaper makes some good acrylic paint as well. Those are probably the three that you're going to be able to get cheap painting sets on Miniature Market. I think Miniature Market deals when it comes to painting sets is some of the best deals on the internet. And everything else, you should go to your local game store and see what they have in stock. and see if you can find a paintbrush like a Army Painter Regiment or some other beginner level paintbrush, and just see what you like, because everybody is different and you're going to find the equipment and the style of stuff that you like a lot. Me, you know what I like? I like cheap stuff. I like stuff on clearance. But other people are always different. So I also like secret weapon paint, but those people went out of business. All right then. Catch ya in the next video.